A very good evening to all of you for the 30th session of the National Mobility Think Tank. We once again welcome you to this special session where we have a special guest who will be briefing us about the conversations and resolutions out of the 27th Conference of Party that took place in Egypt just in the past couple of weeks. Before we dig deeper into this session, I wish in a special way to recognize the presence of the Honorable Minister and leadership team at the Secretariat of Science, Technology and Innovation, State House. And I wish to invite Alan, our Head of Mobility Bureau, to lead us in the opening word of prayer. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Paul, and a good evening to all think tankers and Honorable Minister. Welcome to the 33rd session of the National Mobility Think Tank. Let's sum ourselves by a word of prayer. Almighty God, we thank you for the gift of life. We thank you for this opportunity to converse, to dialogue as we synergize on how we build the National Mobility Think Tank and ecosystem. And in this conversation, we're going to have this evening on the resolutions from the COP27 deliberations. So pray that you guide us with your wisdom and lead us through this conversation. And above all, may your will be done. In Jesus' name I've prayed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Alan. Our speaker is getting ready, but before the speaker gets ready, since in a special way today we have the minister joining us at the beginning, I wish to give the Honorable Minister an opportunity to welcome all the think tankers to the 30th session and usher us into the keynote speech. Honorable Minister, you're most welcome to address the tank.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, Alan. Before I make my remarks, I had a challenge joining the meeting using the link as sent to me in my email. I hope not many people are having a similar challenge and are getting blocked out. I don't know, Alan, how you can try to find out, because it could not link to Zoom. It was not like I'm failing to join this particular meeting, but the link could not connect to Zoom. So cross-check that technical glitch, that people are able to come in. Back to the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have come, and I want to thank our presenter. Strategically thinking, I thought it was very, very important that we take time to look into some strategic things concerning this COP27. Why is it important? It's important because the energy switch is one of the biggest strategic drivers, which is going to determine the direction of technology for the next 20 to 30 years. And usually behind the resolutions, we as African countries, we don't prepare for these resolutions. We just look at the surface and we do not understand the underlyings, the things which are below the iceberg. So we look at them superficially and we come back here, oh, we are supposed to fulfill this, we are supposed to fulfill this. But in the process of fulfilling, you are either damaging your economy or you are missing opportunities. So I believe that in such discussions and resolutions, the truth is not just in the resolution as stated. The actual message is in the what is below, what is under. And through think tanking, we can be able to uncover it. So it's not just about a presentation, it's about us really digging below and trying to get to the root so that we can identify the landmines, but also, more importantly, identify the opportunities so that we can strategically position ourselves. So I recommend this meeting may be the first one, but we need to dig deeper. In my experience, there has never been an international resolution which does not have economic implications. And those implications are usually tipped against us because we don't take time to think. I don't blame the other people because everybody's responsibility is to look out for their nation. But if we do not pay attention and think into these things, we miss to identify where we should log in. So this is what is behind my request that we discuss this. And I want to thank you, Alan, for taking up the challenge and mobilizing. And I want to thank our presenter for coming to lead us into this. But as we begin this discussion, this is a call to think tanking seriously. It's not just about listening to a presentation, it's just to think. So I see the numbers are coming in a little bit. I saw somebody saying there are challenges. So I want to hand over back to you, but that is the reason, that's the agenda behind this discussion. Thank you very much. Enjoy the discussion, and I will be here all through. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for laying a very firm foundation to the 30th session of the National Mobility Think Tank. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is the place where we discuss everything mobility across the entire spectrum of issues, whether it's policy, products, people, plant, as well as regulations, standards, infrastructure that supports mobility. We have those conversations here with the aim of fast tracking the translation of our ecosystem into a vibrant ecosystem that is contributing to the national development agenda and enhancing the transition to e-mobility for the so many benefits that come along with over and above the environmental stewardship case. To this particular moment, I wish to invite our presenter today to give us really a serious education for starters. What is COP27? Why does it matter? And what exactly was there? And as the Honorable Minister has indicated, what could be the implications of what happened in the COP27 to the way we do business here in Uganda and Africa at large. Our presenter tonight is Mr. Edwin Muhumuza, and he's going to tell us more about what he does and what he doesn't do, and then take us deeper into appreciating and getting more insight about the resolutions of the transactions that took place at the COP27 and the implications. You're welcome, Edwin. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan, moderator for this evening. Honorable Minister, colleagues from the Mobility Think Tank, my name is Edwin Muhumuza. I work with the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development in the Department of Labor. I'm one of the senior project managers for the Green Jobs Program, a Government of Uganda program that is ensuring that we utilize our resources, our natural resources efficiently. We make money, we make income, we support women and youth to efficiently use our natural resources, but at the same time for an economic benefit. I also founded a youth organization which has been advancing climate change action in the country. called Youth Go Green. Probably most of you could have heard about that organization, which is successfully mobilizing and engaging the youth of this country to definitely speak about all issues relating to climate change and environment, starting from energy transition, looking at the mitigation, adaptation strategies, and we're trying to see how do we build capacity of the young generation to ensure that they understand everything about climate change science. Friends, I missed narrowly today to say hello to the Honorable Minister, whom I happen to have attended the same meeting this afternoon at Uganda Industry Research Institute. She made a very great presentation. I was in the audience, and I was really, really happy to know and to learn about what the ministry or her docket is doing with the recently launched initiative. That innovation is really, really important for the country. So, Honorable Minister, it's a pleasure for me to meet you virtually. Much as, of course, I saw you, but I was unable to, greet you because I was also rushing for another meeting here. So, friends, I thank the team for having me this evening. I'm really delighted to be with you in this engagement. Just maybe a quick snapshot about what I've been doing. One, in terms of climate change space, I have been one of the key persons in this country that has been following the issues related to climate change in the country. I have had the opportunity to be part of the Uganda delegation to the Conference of the Parties, which normally, of course, happen every year. I started the negotiations as one of the junior or young negotiators for this country. I started with COP27, which was in Paris, and that is France, and that was a time when the Paris Agreement came into this world. From there, of course, I proceeded to participate in the next COPs. The next one was in Marrakesh, Morocco, and I had also an opportunity to be part of that engagement. By then, of course, I had some bit of scanty knowledge about the negotiations, the technical aspects of the entire conferences and what happens there. But of course, with the support of the Ugandan Ministry of Water and Environment, which of course is the focal point for the UNFCCC or the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which of course houses the climate change department, has been able to put up a very technical, strong team of negotiators that normally participate in the Conference of the Parties. Uganda has one of the best teams that are negotiating on behalf of this country. Therefore, it's really a great opportunity for us to understand what happens during the COP, what decisions are taken, what declarations are made, what processes are involved in everything that we do. I am pretty sure that many of you have heard about the nationally determined contributions, which is a mandate of every country party to the Paris Agreement and Kyoto Protocol, that you are mandated to submit your NDCs prior to the Conference of the Parties meeting. And I've had a chance to be part of the team that definitely has been reviewing the Uganda's NDCs, some of the commitments that have been made. The NDCs are basically commitments that are supposed to be made by every country party to the Paris Agreement to ensure that they contribute efforts in emission reduction targets of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So as a country, we have got a very big mandate. The NDCs are very wide. All sectors of the economy are involved. You have agriculture, you have health, you have science and technology, where we are this evening. We're talking about issues of climate change. You have all the sectors which definitely contribute in one way or the other solutions to the adverse effects of climate change. Friends, you may be aware, today I didn't actually prepare a presentation per se and to share with you on the screen, but of course, I put together some of the key issues that will be relevant for this discussion this evening. And I want to let you know that most countries in the Global South, Uganda is part of the Global South countries, simply because by virtue of being one of the developing countries, we fall under that category. When you were negotiating, negotiations happen in groups or blocks. There are countries under the LDCs, they list all listed developed countries, where Uganda is one of them. You have the G77 and China. Uganda also negotiates under the African group of negotiators. So we fall under this at least the three main categories. And these are subsidiary bodies. These are bodies that are recognized, that were established by the UNFCCC Secretariat. They have other negotiation groups for other developed countries. But of course, for us as a country, we negotiate under those three main groups: the G77 and China, the African group of negotiators, and that's the AGN, and of course the LDCs. And the key thematic areas which definitely are discussed and that were put up by the Paris Agreement and also the UNFCCC Secretariat include the climate change finance, climate change gender, climate mitigation, climate change and adaptation, capacity building, technology and transfer, and now the new one, climate change, which has recognized the losses and damages as one of the key thematic areas. Among others, there are not very many, but those 7 thematic areas is where Uganda also takes part and we negotiate.
Are we supposed to be seeing something or?
Not really, Honorable Minister. I did not make put together a presentation, unfortunately, but definitely I will share this organized material. I didn't want to share with you this because I was rushing. I couldn't put everything together, but I'm just using my own talking notes. But I will definitely share with you everything that I had prepared for this. It's not that smart because I had less time to prepare this evening since I was also there in Namalve. But I will definitely put together this material and I will share with the team at your Secretariat, Honorable Minister. Apologies for that. But I just wanted to make a verbal presentation. I hope everybody is listening to me carefully as I take you through this engagement. So as we proceed, Uganda is one of the Global South countries. And you're aware that the Global South countries mainly depend on the direct exploitation of the natural resources, such as biomass, land, minerals, fossil fuels, and water resources. But also we look at the greater portion of their exports that constitute mainly agricultural produce. We look at timber, you look at crude oil, and other minerals. But these countries, including our country, they have been persistent and they have depended on natural resources. And now that definitely poses a very big risk. First of all, our country has limited capacity to encounter these adverse effects of climate change that we contribute to. But even that, our country is one of the low-income countries, which definitely presents us to be in a situation to have technological development challenges. I'm very happy and excited that now this institution is advancing the innovation and science. I'm happy that at least this docket is handled critically. Now, when we go to COP, like for instance, COP17, which was recently held in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, there are critical decisions that were taken by the world leaders. These materials are very technical in nature because countries argue, debate, discuss, harmonize, disagree. They are so hectic. There are complex processes involved in these processes. That's why our country must train our negotiators, because the developed countries have their own stand. Developing countries have their others, they have their stand. But consensus has always been a challenge. That's why you continue to see negotiations happening every year. There are critical elements that are not always decided on by the parties. A party may be interested in climate change, for instance, mitigation, but the other country is happy to go with climate change adaptation, just as an example. But why we group ourselves in different thematic groups or subsidiary bodies is to have a harmonized position to ensure that we agree. If it is a developing country like Uganda, we have Rwanda, we have Kenya, Tanzania, we have other countries like Egypt. These are some of the developing countries. So we group ourselves together and say, okay, as far as climate change financing is concerned, we need developed countries or these big emitters to pay for the losses and damages. I'm just giving an example, and this is what happens during these negotiations. I have been able to see a large delegation from Uganda. I know some of us go there for probably to attend side events, but there are those critical negotiators that go and attend these meetings. I will highlight some of the decisions that were made during COP27. And one of them, which was really, really critical, was about matters relating to the work program that was urgently discussed. And this was a critical issue which all parties, especially from the Global South, decided that at least the developed countries, the world leaders should be able to put money. And this is the financing of losses and damages. Under this, funding arrangements for responding to loss and damages associated with the adverse effects of climate change, of course, that include those activities or projects or initiatives that must be done, must be implemented in countries which have been able to face these disasters. The success message that we got for our country was that the world leaders agreed to find resources, to find money to support LDCs or developing countries for the losses and damages. When you talk about losses and damages, we're talking about already floods, for instance, in Uganda, floods, mudslides, landslides already killing our people, destroying properties. But then how do these big emitters like US and China to be able to pay for the losses that we have already encountered, the damages that we have already encountered? Our bridges have been washed away, schools have been washed away. But how do we make sure that these big emitters pay? Because they are big emitters, how do they pay for these losses? And that is why we were pushing for the financing or for a mechanism for this engagement. And Uganda, of course, had some of the experts that were contributing to the different texts and modalities of ensuring that financing for loss and damage is critically decided on and confirmed. So the next coming COPs, of course, COP28 is going to be in Dubai. We hope to see now the modalities of how financing loss and damage will be effected. So procedures, processes will be launched, will be now put in place. The other critical issue was, of course, that was decided on, which of course is a joint program. They call it Sharm el-Sheikh Joint Program on the Implementation of Action on Agriculture and Food Security. These parties at COP27 decided that they should have capacity building for country parties, for this decision to take place. For all activities relating to ensuring food security and agriculture, there must be capacity building for countries like the LDCs like the global south countries, to be able to be in position to provide food for their countries. And of course, the other issue that was critical, normally the technology, where now our institution of science and technology comes in, which I would really want Honorable Minister to pick interest in ensuring that at least this time around you start probably sending some of your technical teams to join this, is that there is a thematic area on capacity building for technological transfer. This is very critical for our country because now very many countries have no capacity, including Uganda, to provide solutions for climate change. And technology is one of the key issues that have been discussed extensively during the conference of the parties. The CTCN, which is the Climate Technology Network, which has been financing some of the elements to do with climate technology, a decision was taken, and that every country, especially LDCs and the Global South, they must build capacity of their countries in terms of training, in terms of resource mobilization to ensure that some of the innovations that are being innovated, that are being developed, ensure implementation. So this is what they call the Santiago Network. The Santiago Network emphasizes that there must be processes and procedures where technology transfer is going to be financed. And the country parties were able to raise issues to look at the text which was organized to ensure that at least there are modalities of how technology is going to be improved in some of the country parties. The other critical discussion which the country parties were enforcing, were trying to advocate for, was about the climate change adaptation. Now, before there has been an adaptation fund, but the adaptation fund has not been easily accessed by the country parties. So again, there were reviews. They made the fourth review of the adaptation fund. This review of the adaptation fund was set up a committee in 2022. And now they are reviewing the progress, the effectiveness, and the performance of the committee. However, during COP27, this committee gave reports, and these reports were discussed extensively. And of course, looking at the reports, some of the issues that were raised were about the processes. Governments, for instance, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Water and Environment, these two institutions have been accredited for GCF, or Green Climate Fund. But you see that very many innovations, institutions that are advancing climate solutions have not had an opportunity to access these finances. So the committee gave recommendations for what can be done to ensure that at least these processes are simplified for the countries, but even given opportunity to organizations like civil society organizations, NGOs, they should be able to apply for these adaptation funds, and they get this money. But the committee was set, and now they are reviewing what is going to happen and how these procedures will be simplified. The other critical element that was discussed and decided on were, of course, matters relating to action for climate empowerment. A report was given during the COP on the implementation status, because this is Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which talks about awareness, education, training, and of course, looking at how countries should be able to understand issues relating to climate change. Is the population aware of what is going to happen about climate change science? Do they have the data? Do they have the right information? Is the communities able to translate information into data that will help to provide solutions for climate change. So some of these processes have not been catered for under this Article 6. So COP27 was able to come up with a work program, which they call Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh Work Program on the Global Goal on Adaptation. Now, this definitely was related, is feeding into the Article 6, where countries must be able to put together to build capacity of their population and their institutions to ensure that they respond to climate change issues. The other element which was critically discussed, let me see here. They also set up what they call a joint annual technology executive committee. And this is now again where our Ministry of Science and Technology should be able to pick interest and follow up these issues relating to climate change technologies, where they are discussed during the conference of the parties. They have set up already, one of the decisions is that there must be a climate change technology center, and at least this center should be able to have focal points in different countries, especially in the global south. Now, if Uganda is strategic enough and well positioned, we could be able to have at least a focal point office or unit will at least change technology. This is. The other decision that was really critical was on the implementation of the Gender Action Plan. Climate change, of course, has been very critical when it comes to climate change and gender. At least Uganda is privileged to have a focal point for climate change and gender. Win Masiko has been following up these issues to ensure that at least gender is being mainstreamed in all our work plans and interventions that we do as a country. I'm sure these are already captured in the NDP 3, and Uganda has been really pushing hard to ensure that gender is one of the key elements to ensure that is captured perfectly well, and the population really understands some of the gender roles. You're aware that in our country, in our rural communities, women are vulnerable than men when it comes to climate change. And there are processes which are supporting gender or women to ensure that their innovations, their programs, their green enterprises are supported. So UNCCC is very interested in issues related to climate change and gender. And in COP27, there has been an immediate review of the implementation of the action plan, because the action plan was launched. I think that was in Glasgow. I think that was COP26. And this action plan should be implemented by other country parties. Uganda should be able to pick this action plan, budget, look for resources, and implement. That's why we need to build the capacity of our population, of our technical experts, to write more bankable project proposals and get money that will be able to enable us to implement some of these gender-related roles and initiatives. Friends, quite a number of decisions, of course, were taken. I couldn't capture everything, but in a snapshot, that's what we're able to pick as a country. I know the Ministry of Water and Environment will definitely convene a national forum, which will be looking at tracking progress and looking at the next steps, where the country will be and how ready it will be prepare itself for COP28. However, the the ministry, I'm sure it is also because it has a mandate to track progress on the NDC implementation, because every year, every party to the Paris Agreement must submit their NDCs or nationally determined contributions. And that's why I would want to really encourage Honorable Minister here and your team to ensure that you track some of the issues related to innovations, technology, and science when it comes to climate change solutions. I am sure that in the NDC book, there must be a mention about innovation, technology, and of course, looking at all the climate change solutions that come through from the power of innovation. So it's very important for us to pick interest in these matters. Climate change is already happening. We have already witnessed. I don't want to mention this. Everybody really understands that climate change has been affecting our communities, has been affecting us as a country, and it's high time we respond to it. I was very excited to see that, for instance, the Ministry of Energy here was able to really talk about Uganda's plan for the energy transition and renewable energy processes. Very many countries would approach our country delegates to talk about our oil pipeline now, talking about UCO, but I think the Honorable Minister was able to explain how we are responding to this challenge, the challenge of climate change, where we are sustainably using our natural resources and our resource that is coming, oil and gas. So I think it's the same thing that we should also do in terms of innovation, advancing technology. E-mobility is one of the key things that I saw being discussed from the side events. There are very many dialogues that were talking about e-mobility. Institutions are already trying to promote e-mobility in terms of having sustainable transport systems that will definitely not be emitting the greenhouse gases. So I think, and there are very many opportunities at that level. There are very many development partners, very many organizations that are willing to support strategic programs that relate to this kind of innovation that is now being picked. So I would want to really interest your ministry to ensure that at least when it comes to ensure in new innovations, especially in the transport system, there are very many organizations that will be willing to support and fund these engagements. Lastly, I want to say that when we were at COP, of course, you continue to meet organizations representative of very huge development partners, and I think I was privileged to meet one of the organizations based in Italy, which picked interest in building capacity of our country in terms of equipping, skilling, especially the young people, those who have innovations, but they are not supported, those who have no skills, but they can be given skills. And these people are really willing to ensure that at least they start trainings, they start skilling our young people, they start skilling some of the organizations that are strategically looking at addressing climate change issues. We've already started some discussions. Hopefully, when we have another meeting, I will definitely probably ask Alan I will give you an update. I will give you a brief of how your institution can be able to probably establish the possibility of having a partnership in terms of building capacity of our institution of science and innovation. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me stop here. I will be happy to have your your questions, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Edwin, for the quite insightful presentation that you've given regarding the resolutions and outcomes of the COP27. I would now wish to open up the conversation to invite participation from the rest of the tank as we delve deeper especially into how the discussions relate specifically to e-mobility and the promise of e-mobility in economic transformation. So whoever is ready to make your submission, whether a question, an addition, or even a subtraction, you're most welcome. You can raise your hand up and we dig right in.
Paul, I'm
Yes.
not coming to submit, but I had requested Alan. The request for this session started with a posting on the mobility platform. So I'd requested Alan to repost the document. So for those members who are on the platform, or he can post it in the chat so that it could also serve as a reference document for the discussions as we go. Okay,
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Wanted to mention that now.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for that submission. Alan, I know you've already posted on the WhatsApp page. If you could also post here in the chat room so that we have a quick reference as we get to deepen the conversation around the resolutions from COP27 and how those relate to e-mobility and the promise of e-mobility to economic transformation of the nation. We have two hands up, one from Alan Katwesije and Geoffrey Mutabazi. I will start with Geoffrey Mutabazi. Go ahead and greet the tank and make your submission.
Thank you so much. I think it's been a while since we came together. I really loved the topic on e-mobility, and thank you to Edwin for sharing more about this event. My question is really a follow-up on some of the discussions that were had just recently at the CEO, the Presidential CEO Roundtable. And mainly this is about the offtake. I followed some of the engagements at COP, and maybe I missed the particular session because there were so many side sessions, but I didn't see a lot of focus on offtake of e-mobility solutions by large fleet owners or mobility I would say users as companies, because when you look at most of the companies that actually have large fleets that need to be transitioned to electric mobility, most of these companies are global companies, and the decisions are usually made at a global scale, not at the regional or local scale. So it becomes very difficult to even drive the agenda locally. Yes, we might have the government push and have some directives from government to buy buses and buy motorcycles and all these things. But I think we also need a massive push on the global front on uptake of these solutions from the large corporates and the large players in this field. My name is Geoffrey. I'm also a player in this field. I run a startup that builds electric bicycles. And I know this because we are working with some global companies. And yes, you'll get a yes locally, but it's very hard for you to get to scale and do millions or even thousands of units in multiple countries or even export if you don't have that global consensus. So maybe Edwin, you could shed some light on that particular discussion if it was even had. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know. I can respond to this, or there could be some other hands that probably I could respond at once. I see Alan Katwesije. I don't know. Should I just respond now, or could have some of the colleagues put down?
Let's take Alan Katwesije's submission. And if there is one more, then you respond to those as others mobilize their submissions. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, members. I would like to thank the think tank for this entertaining marathon of information on climate change. Then thank Edwin for your consistency on climate change education and conservation of Uganda's natural resources. I also would like to, in a special way, thank the minister for joining us. I would like to, to have Edwin shed more light. I became interested in one of the issues, especially during the discussions on the adaptation fund. Really, if Uganda, we are in the global south, and we are still hearing these things of the fund not being accessible, easily accessible by the LDCs. Is it a problem of the country, or it is the problem by those guys who should be remitting these funds to support the adaptation and mitigation of climate change effects? Then another thing which I would like to bring to attention of these think tankers is climate change education. As a country, we are still lagging behind on this issue. We see floods on the TV, we get information of adverse climate change impacts on radio, but as a country, and to be specific, I think is the Ministry of Information, it is not doing enough to make Ugandans understand what climate change is all about. So finally, I would like to thank Edwin once more, because he's been consistent and has been one of those unique climate change crusaders to have what I'm talking about disseminated to the public on a regular basis. Thank you.
Yes, Edwin, you could, oh yeah, there is another hand from another Alan. Yes, Alan Muhumuza, please go ahead and make your submission.
Thank you, Chairperson of the think tank, Paul, and Edwin, for the very informative conversation. I had three key questions and comments. I have looked, I know Uganda was one of the first countries to submit their NDC. Yeah. And recently we also did an update to the NDC. You highlighted that we need to do this annually. Is that correct? Is it an annual review for the NDC? Okay, you maybe respond to that. But when I scanned through both NDCs, specifically in terms of e-mobility, which is our main focus really for this think tank, outside other interests, because I know many others might have other interests outside the e-mobility, especially on climate change. But my key interest is there. I think it was a bit silent on e-mobility specifically. And I think that's an area that we can improve also, given the government's prioritization of the transition to e-mobility. Maybe you can also guide how we can have that conversation to see how the NDC can be better focused, to be also actionable beyond having overarching principles. And I know that few people refer to the NDC as a planning framework. How can we also strengthen that and have a bit of ownership across the board on all levels of government, such that the NDC can take its rightful place as well to enable us achieve the Paris Agreement Paris Agreement targets. My other question is at the COP26, there was a declaration that was specific on e-mobility, even giving targets for both the developed countries and those that and the rest of the world. And this had been signed by a number of parties, including governments, cities, manufacturers of vehicles, fleet operators, and financial institutions. Looking at 2035 for zero emissions in new cars and vans in leading markets, and 2040 for the rest of the world. I don't know if there was conversation around how far this could have gone in terms of implementation, and what collaborative measures might be there to see how we expedite and strengthen this declaration. We also highlighted, of course, that there are a number of side events, like typically at COPs, and maybe there's an area you might have not been involved in, but I think in the event that you know someone who could have participated in some of these side events that could also contribute toward this conversation, would be more than glad to have him on the think tank WhatsApp group, so that they can also share their experience in that effect. My last comment and question is, we have of course, most of these countries, which is really was the gist of this COP discussion, they have developed, they catalyzed the economic transformation by utilizing technologies that were impacting climate. And those effects are now being felt. Of course, I know that there are conversations around now these LDCs that did not utilize and harness those technologies. How can they catapult the economic transformation? And of course, the technologies that are utilizing renewables and sustainability are either still very expensive or are in the hands of the same countries that used the technologies that have brought us where we are today. I wanted to pick your thoughts on, given the interactions you've had and your experience, your thoughts on how, as a country, specifically Uganda, we can position ourselves and see how to leverage, because one of the strategy we're using at the Secretariat is the loop and loop strategy, where you're looping the first, second, third industrial revolution that might have left us behind. So technologies there that might still be relevant and we participate in there, but also leap forward with the fourth industrial revolution and also the fifth as it comes, and how we can also utilize the new technologies and develop them here in Uganda. So with this technology transfer, were there any conversations there on bringing that technology to the hands that actually need it to also propel the economic transformation, and also have it affordable in the process, or the funding is mainly towards paying back for effects that we are seeing, but still leaving those same countries stuck without the technologies to enable them to propel themselves forward? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Very good. So now over to you, Edwin. Yeah. Let's take those ones, then we will get back with Peter Wamala and the others. Edwin?
Okay, thanks a lot, Moderator Paul, for enabling our participants come through with the comments, questions, and of course, I'm really excited that at least this discussion is taking shape, because in the past, honestly speaking, you wouldn't hear some of these terminologies or discussions happening this is a new kid on the block. Climate change is something new, but it again comes with quite a number of issues that are being discussed. So Godfrey, of course, you did mention about the e-mobility. It's a new concept, honestly. As a country, I think very few. Still, we need to do a lot. If we were to advance technology that will definitely see us transit into green economy, then our population really must understand. And it is when we start conversations, dialogues, and discussions of this nature that then even the country, even our members of parliament who pass these budgets will really understand the relevance of a country starting to think about e-mobility. That means that we must do a little more in terms of disseminating information about the importance of this technology, but also the need for the emission reduction. As a country, we have a target. We are part of the countries that will definitely contribute to the reduction of global emission reduction targets. But how much are we doing? If we revitalize our transport system and we start thinking about e-mobility, or whatever we are doing, of all kind of things that we are using for transportation, and we start allowing ourselves to move away from carbon emitting fossil fuels towards energy that is supplied from electrical power sources, then we will be good to go. So I know this is something new, but we must keep track of every process that is involved in this process, in this engagement. Decarbonizing our transport sector is important because it creates a cleaner and healthier, and of course, very affordable future for everybody. And I think it is important that we start looking at that. If you are a startup, and of course you are using electricity to produce a product, how are you able to share information and knowledge to other groups of people who have similar innovations, but they have not started to think about using these electric kind of products that will move them? So I think it's very, very important. I know the international community, they have advanced, they are already there. When we are in these global meetings, you will see the buses that we use as zero emission transport systems. They don't emit anything, but they are everywhere. You find millions of buses taking delegates from the conference venue to their hotels. So we must ask ourselves, how is Uganda positioned to tap into such technology, but also acquire resources? But there is no way you can bring such technology when we do not have capacity to adopt to such processes. We must build the capacity of our country to adopt some of these interventions that we must look at. And also, I would think that we must develop frameworks, strategies that will ensure that we advance this innovation. And I think guys like Godfrey, who is already looking in that direction, you are one of those that will probably, if you are given further training, further capacity building, then you will definitely create an impact in a community where you live in and where other people live in. Alan talks about the climate change fund. Who has the problem? Why is it that Uganda is not accessing, or even Ugandans are not accessing this fund? Are these international wealthy countries or wealth countries putting conditions that will definitely see their money remain in their economy? Or it's us that really have an issue that we cannot have projects that can attract the funding? Now, I would say still as a country, we really haven't had the opportunity to have the expertise to understand what are the requirements? How can we fulfill these requirements? There are very, very few people that can actually apply for these international funding mechanisms and they get through. You will find if a ministry or an institution of government or agency of government gets a grant or it will hire a consultant. It will definitely hire a consultant, somebody, in fact, an international consultant who will write a proposal and they get this money. Meaning that we still have capacity gaps which must fill as a country, which we must address. We must train our people. We must understand the kind of technology that these guys want. If you are having a proposal, what are the key areas that will definitely attract this person to say, oh, this is a very good initiative and the processes are very clear and you can get through. But again, I think as a country, we must do a lot more of research. We must invest in research and development. We have really, really taken for granted this kind of this sector. R&D, yes, we are feeling the presence of R&D in our everyday life, but we have not excelled. And what these wealthy countries are doing, they are doing a lot of research. They're investing in research and development. Their monies, their resources is getting into research. Research is very critical because it is from this that you definitely understand what is required. What are those requirements? So we must continue to address capacity gaps in terms of information, knowledge, and understanding of the climate change science. We have not educated our population about climate change, about environment conservation. We must address the issue of information gap, which we must. If we want to position ourselves to tap into some of these financing mechanisms, then we must definitely get to build the capacity of our population. The e-mobility, of course, remains silent, as Alan Muhumuza says, because I know at a global level, the global North countries are really advancing in this space. The global South, of course, are still struggling in looking at how do they adapt the climate change impacts, how do they address already existing impacts of climate change, how do they put food on the table for the families. They are still looking at that. As developed nations, we have not advanced to have this kind of technology but we must start. We must start talking about these processes. We cannot keep quiet. The NDCs, of course, we have done revisions. Like I think this is the third or fourth, if I'm not mistaken. But they keep mentioning some of these commitments. But how much do we do? How do we ensure that there are available resources to enable us address the challenges of probably failure to implement some of these commitments? I know UNDP and the Ministry of Water, I think they have the NDC implementation plan, which they already launched. And I think the next step is to see how are these sectors going to be clustered and which responsible agency of government is going to do what. And I think it's very, very, very important that before we look at that, again, we must look at what is required. What information is required to enable us to address some of these challenges or even fulfill and implement the NDCs. So Alan, you did mention that there was a declaration on e-mobility during COP26 in Glasgow. And you wanted to know how far in terms of implementation. And then some of the measures that are already in place to expedite or to track the implementation process. Yes, of course, I know there was a declaration on that, but of course, if countries are struggling with other issues, then even when you go to the conference of the parties, you will find very few discussions on e-mobility. That's why we needed to raise awareness. We needed to sensitize our people. We needed to empower, like a unit like this one. This think tank is a very good platform, which will continue to advocate. When you look at, for instance, the funding of loss and damage, which was decided on during COP27, the entire world, international NGOs, civil society organizations started raising awareness on financing for losses and damages. They put pressure to the global North countries to ensure that they pay for what they have really done to us. Everybody, every country was talking about financing for loss and damage. And that's what happened. So we need to start again advocating for funding of e-mobility technology. We must build capacity of our people. We must empower institutions like the Ministry of ICT, of Science and Technology, STI. We must know that there is a gap, a very big gap that we must address in this process. You also asked how can Uganda position herself to ensure that it is ready for the next in the industrial revolution stages that are coming, but still the same thing. Capacity building is very, very important. And priority must be given to some of if we want to advance quickly and fast, we must prioritize some of our programs. If you look at Kampala here, everybody, most of all these young people have sold their land, they are buying border borders, and they are all in town. Everybody must drive a car. That's what the happiness of every family now is, to own a car. Now that this has already happened, how can we reverse that trend as a country? How can we prepare ourselves to ensure that we tap into the technology that is already available, but also the new innovation that we'll come up with? And most importantly, there is no way that you can advance this technology without talking about financial resources. We must ensure that we skill our people, we skill our population. Our workforce must understand the green growth strategy, for instance. What does it entail? What is required? We must do outreaches, but also invest mainly, as I conclude, invest mainly in research and development. It's very, very key, because it's what will definitely take us there. Yeah, I think that's what I can say for now. Over to you, moderator.
Paul, are you there?
I think we might have lost Paul, but as he joins us again, I could be taking over the session. I see 3 hands, so I will request Peter to go first, then Shaz next. And before I invite Honorable, since I see the hand as well after that, in case there's no other person who would like to contribute. So Peter, over to you. Peter, you could unmute in case you're speaking.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Wamala. I am a consultant in the area of strategy. I'm also involved in the petroleum business. So I'll give some insights, first beginning with the petroleum and how it affects our movement into e-mobility. 80% of petroleum is bought by 20 other vehicles that consume a lot of petroleum are ambulances, police patrol trucks, and so forth. So it is within the ambit of government to make sure that, for example, if we say that all police motorcycles, all ambulances of government are electric, then obviously most of the petroleum will not be consumed. And therefore, by controlling only 20% of the fleets, we'll have reduced petroleum consumption by 80%. I give another illustration. To promote exports, government has waived taxes on refrigerated trucks so that you transport vegetables, you transport all fresh produce. But we could also insist that all refrigerated trucks are actually electric, such that we hit two birds with one stone. The other insight probably is on which we have not talked about, may not be necessarily in e-mobility, are the generators. Everybody, although we are talking electricity is still so unreliable. I'd be very interested to hear from Paul what happens at Chira Motors when the power goes off, because like it or not, power is still very unstable. So are we thinking of finding generators that are not using fossil fuels so that we go in a tandem with the moving away from fossil fuels? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, we can have Miti, Mr. Miti, before the Honorable Minister comes in.
Thank you very much, Alan. My question goes out to Edwin. Edwin, we've talked before. I am Charles Miti from Uganda Christian University, and I would like to question. About the point you've emphasized of building capacity building. Actually, I see with the organization Youth Go Green, you're doing a lot in that regard with students in and around university. At Uganda Christian University, we have a climate club, which I happen to be the president of. It is called the Clan. And under the Clan, we are basically creating awareness about climate change. And we created that club because we saw there was a loophole. Many students were not quite aware of climate change as an imminent problem. But whereas those that even knew about it were not directly relating to it as part of the solution. So they think about it as a problem for policymakers and for the government. Yet, actually, it is a problem that each one of us has to partake to create solutions in. So with our climate club, we've been successful at engaging students into climate actions. And we have a couple of initiatives we are actually supporting in terms of science and technology, in terms of agriculture, and in terms of actually building students' talent such that whichever course the student does, they relate it to the problem that we have at hand, which is climate change. So whichever course it is, it could be law, it could be mass communication, it could be business, what can you contribute? So we basically are aligning people to, students to the problem that we have at hand. So I would like to know what your organization, Youth Go Green, does as far as supporting youth-led climate innovations, and as well creating awareness or educating youth about the problem as it is, because we saw there was a loophole and many students, young people, distance themselves from the problem. So please guide us on that.
Thank you, Charles. Honorable Minister, take the floor. We see your hand is up.
Thank you very much, Edwin, for the presentation, and thank you all those who have shared. I want to take us back a little bit to the basics before I build the questions that I have. What is Uganda's biggest risk? what is Uganda's biggest worry? And where is it coming from? Because I have followed these climate change issues, and you see countries have a basis upon which they base as national interests, not because the international community demands, but as national interests. There has to be a foundation upon which you base your priorities in terms of the national risks and the national benefits. What is Uganda's main challenge? And maybe to break it up, if Uganda went to zero emissions, what would be the impact on our ecosystem? Let's say we cut Uganda's emissions to zero now, and the rest of the world is going on with their things. What impact would that have globally or even above just our own atmosphere? How big an impact would that be? And if so, how do we target? Because in climate change, there is contributing to the problem and there is suffering from the problem. When we compare our contribution to the problem, other than being bullied around and pushed, how big is it? How big is it if we go back to our own? This is Uganda, this is a national interest. Because I've seen America going for these agreements and pulling out of the agreements and saying we are looking at national interests. Now that we are in-house, we are at home, what should we kill ourselves doing? Especially in terms of emissions. There are other climate change things like, contributing to the drought and what. But in terms of cutting emissions, if really Uganda ground our economy to zero and cut emissions like we did during COVID, what would be the impact globally, regionally? I would love to hear some of those issues. And that takes me to the other flip side. What about Uganda as a victim of climate change issues coming from elsewhere? How big is that? And how should we position ourselves to reduce that impact on us? And if I was to arrange these priorities as 1 and 2, which one should be 1? Is it to cut our emissions, or is it to defend ourselves against the impact of other people who are polluting the environment? Which would it be? Because for me, once we have defined that, then we will be able to identify our internal objectives so that we go to these issues with Uganda's defined goals and objectives. What is the bigger priority? Because sometimes we get run around by international resolutions, but we are coming from international resolutions to home instead of coming from home to international resolutions. So when I looked through most of this, what was discussed, I read through that document, and again, I scanned through it here. How can we pick out that which is most important to us? Then the third thing is beyond the other people funding us, which is not in our control. I mean, I don't know how easily available these monies have been and how long it takes. If we were to identify our areas of priorities in investment, where would that be? In terms of even R&D, it is big, but what would we be targeting to be? What would we be targeting to develop for ourselves? We can keep pushing and lobbying for that money, But if it becomes our preoccupation, remember the other people who are giving us money, they have their agendas too. And their goal, their primary goal is for their nations, not really for us as Uganda. And if they can delay money so that they can go ahead of us, they will. So that by the time your trickle of crumbs from the table fall down, they have already achieved their objectives and goals. So what would be our own strategic things that we see from the things that we see that we are discussed here? And if Uganda as a nation was to prioritize our investment, and the last one is, I don't believe in us just thinking other people will come and solve our problems. Yes, that one is there, but it should not be to the exclusion of us finding our own problems. Where are the strategic advantages that we can take care of? Where people think, oh, this is a developing world, this is a third world country. They are not thinking as usual. Because for me, all those discussions there, they are camouflaging something where national interests are overriding. Either their technologies are not yet mature so that they will avail them to sell to you. So they are pushing around these meetings over and over. So where can we identify technological development opportunities so that we can supply, we can be a source? Well, Ivan, you kept talking about capacity development, capacity building. Where should that capacity development focus? And we can develop the capacity internally. We can start with something so that even as we chase these funds internationally, we have something we are beginning. So I know I've asked a lot of difficult questions, but if we can flip really as a nation, which leg should we put ahead? The one who is generating or the one who is supplying? It is okay for me to shout about e-mobility as zero emission, but really what is my strategy? My strategy is not so much that I will, by doing this in Uganda, I am going to save the world. My strategy is that I need to use that as a source of technology and as a contribution of technology, and so that my technologies can have access or to market, even when we have developed them here. So those fundamental questions, those two questions, which leg, given where Uganda is, which leg should go ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Edwin, you have very serious questions.
The questions,
I think
don't leave them for Edwin.
Edwin, you can start the conversation to see whether we can mainstream, especially the Honorable Minister has brought out very, very, very serious issues. When you're passing in the neighborhood and they are having goat stew, does that solve your dinner need? They're eating goat stew, and when you go back home, you don't even have eggplant, or you don't even need goat stew. So Edwin, say a few things and then we see how others come through.
All right, I will definitely have the opportunity to respond to the Honourable Minister as I will conclude also with other colleagues that have, some have been, of course, comments and others some questions. But I really must appreciate the Minister for having that vision. When you scan through, indeed, like you are saying, what are the key challenges? What risk are we as a country are we facing? And what should we prioritize? I think it's really, really important to first of all, understand what is the biggest risk in terms of emissions or in terms of our natural environment and the way we are doing things. And I must say that if you are looking at what you must look at in terms of prioritizing some of the solutions that relate to climate change, in climate change science is what they call mitigation. and there's also what they call adaptation. If you critically look at these two key things, these are very, very, very important. There's none that is bigger than the other. However, for me, as I think, as a country, as Uganda, the way it is right now, one, we have already witnessed, we're already feeling the impacts of climate change, the global warming. The issues are there with us. People no longer have money, the economy is too hard, people have no food, poverty levels probably have, even in some parts of the country, they have increased. I think, to me, we must focus on mitigation, because mitigation will give you an opportunity to stop whatever challenges that are associated with climate change to come again and disrupt the economy or even the livelihoods of the people. And that is where we must emphasize emission reduction, because we must get back to our natural state of affairs in terms of environmental conservation, or the way we are doing things. When you focus on mitigation, quite a number of things will happen. Of course, mitigation is broad. It has so many interventions. You look at all these renewable energy innovations, you're looking at biodiversity conservation or restoration of the ecosystems. All those are processes that will definitely help us to mitigate. And as long as we address that, then I think the other adaptation element, we will continue to handle it as it comes, because you cannot solve this problem at a go. You can't. So as the minister asked, how can Uganda position herself in terms of emission reduction? What strategy do we have? Should we continue to beg, or should we be able to have the capacity to innovate and have our own solutions in our own hands? Now, that also calls for priority. We are where we are simply because Uganda and our government has not prioritized the issues of environment. We had for some time, some years ago, we have not taken this environment sector seriously. Even when we are allocating resources, you look at our budgets, how much money goes to the environment sector. So now we are actually now waking up to know that, hey, so these issues are really happening and they are a threat. I have been following His Excellency the President's State of the Nation addresses that he makes over a time, and for the last, I think the last minus the Ebola and okay, let's say COVID, he has at least now recognized that the biggest threat right now Uganda is facing is not insecurity, it's not anything, but it is climate change. I have at least heard him, seen him speak about these issues. Our biggest threat is what is happening right now. Because there is no way you can, there is no way our country will have no food, and if we don't have food supply, food security is not guaranteed. Even when we have technology and we have no food, people will tell you we can't eat technology. We can't. We must survive. We must live. You must be healthy for you to do anything you want to do. So our priority now should be on the mitigation measures. We must advance our technology. We must innovate. We must come up. We must, if we're talking about e-mobility, it is okay because this is not going to happen today, but it can happen. It can have a very big impact for the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years. So we must invest in research. We must continue. If we want to be self-sustaining, if we want to do things on our own, if we want to not to depend on other people's technology, we must then invest in research, understand what is required, what is needed for our emission reduction. Is it something that we can, if we're talking about e-mobility, Is it possible? Can it work or it can't work? So I think that's where we must. Now, that also brings in the issue of our education system. What are we teaching? What technology are we innovating and we are teaching our young generation, our people in the universities, our education system? What curriculum are we following? I mean, these developed countries are where they are just because of they have been able to learn, to study, to research, and that's why they are ahead of us. They have invested in the education systems. They have done everything possible to ensure that they now know what they're supposed to. Look at these big emitters. They have emitted a lot of greenhouse gas emission, but they continue to advance. They are now coming back to say, oh, okay, we did bad. But you see, yes, I know we have discovered our oil, but we must use it sustainably. We must use our oil to address other issues that are pertinent. So I must appreciate you, Honourable Minister, for that understanding that there are quite a number of things that we must do. When you say, where do I put my leg first? What should I prioritize? What should our parliament, what kind of budgets should we pass? If you don't invest in technology, if you don't invest in science, if you don't invest in innovations, then, I mean, we will remain the way we are. So it's high time that government of Uganda starts to think that research must be prioritized, technology must be prioritized. There are certain things that we must do to reduce we cannot just wake up and say, we are looking at our emission reduction. We're going to, yes, I know we have plants, we have forests, we have our natural resources, but look at the wetlands. Everybody is now building in a wetland. They all have titles. I mean, we must educate our population. We must create awareness. There are certain, we must change our behavior. And that's how we'll be saved. So when we are talking about all these things, then we must look for resources. We must look for funding. Of course, I mean, it's a fact that we cannot address every issue at the same time. No, I will agree that we must prioritize. I know our minister mentioned quite a number of things, but at least that is my position. That's what I can say. Our interests should be around mitigation. We must do certain things that will save the country for the next 100 or so many years that will come along. And it's very, very important. Now, some other members, of course, asked Mr. Peter Wamara. I think Peter was giving really some good comments. He talked about a strategy. He's in petroleum business, and the strategy is that how about all government vehicles are electric? That's a very good strategy. How about all? It's a policy. It's a policy that we can do. It's a policy that now all our hospital ambulances or our government vehicles that we drive, they must be electric. This is a good strategy. It's possible. And then we look at the renewable energy systems, the sources of energy. We have all these things. Much as these technologies are very expensive, but we can start small. We can concentrate and invest in such technologies because if we want to save our country, then we must look at these processes. I think the last person, Miti Charles, thank you so much for what you're doing with the students. Again, I say it's the young generation. These are young innovators. These are students, these are young people who are willing to take on any kind of challenge they come across. And investing in the young generation in terms of knowledge, in terms of training, in terms of skilling is good, is the way to go. So capacity building, which I really want to continue to emphasize, if we don't know, then we can't do much. If you don't know anything, you never know, you can never do anything. But if you get to know, then you definitely get there. So I'm happy that you already mobilized the students. Thank you so much for making sure that they understand issues of climate change. It's a new thing. I tell you, there are some communities where you go to, even our government departments. Someone says, you talk about climate change and someone is like, what is that? Imagine we have a law, we have an act, we have a law which was passed by, which was a bill that was passed by the president and ascended to it. It's now a law. But how many people understand that there is a climate change law? It's no longer even a bill, but it's now a law. It's there. If we disseminate information across board, if our education institutions all in the country understand issues to do with climate, there are these small actions that we can stop doing and we will save this country. Why would you drive a car just for about 2 kilometers or 1 kilometer? Why can't you just take a walk? What happened to our bicycles? In the villages, you no longer see those bicycles. The border-borders have taken over. You just about 600 to 1,000 meters, someone will jump on a border. How about if you decide to walk? In Kampala here, if you don't have a car, for the young people who are not yet married, there's no one who will accept you. No girl will accept you. No one. But these are some of the behaviors. So we must change the mindset of our people, and it starts with the young people. So Alan, you're asking, what does our organization, how can it empower and engage the young people to understand that climate change is real, but there are some solutions that they can do. We have had an opportunity to train youth in different aspects. Renewable energy is one of them, recycling, innovations around waste management. Some of us see our waste as waste, but some of us see waste as money, as wealth. But these are some of the processes. These are what we call the green jobs. So Miti, I want to assure you that we will definitely get in touch to see how best do we train, build capacity of our youth, understand issues related to climate change. We have what we call our Youth Climate Academy, where we are mentoring and training and ensuring that the youth now start. Most of you could have heard, I'm a climate activist, I'm a climate activist. You don't just become a climate change activist. No, there are processes, there are things that you must know for you to be a climate activist. You're advocating for what? But we will continue to do the same. We will continue to engage the universities. We have clubs in every university. Most of the university, we have our Youth Go Green clubs. Makere, one of the, I think, strongest chapters that is advancing. We have representatives for all the colleges. And that's what we want to do in every university. So again, we will speak. We will very soon, we have rolled out our youth debates, competitions where young people will be debating issues related to environment, to climate change, to our natural resources. And that is one way of disseminating information and sharing information. So we will talk more about that. And then we see how best do we engage that initiative. How can we make it stronger? How can it go to the community, not only in UCU, but how can these young people go back to their communities and start sensitizing the masses on the best practices for adaptation, for mitigation, and all of that. So we will definitely engage and continue to share a little more. Friends, I don't want to really take long on this, but I must appreciate your comments, your questions. Honorable Minister, for us, we are willing to collaborate. I mean, we have had an opportunity to understand the climate change challenge way back. We know, and continue to advocate for e-mobility. It's good. It's a very great innovation. I'm happy the president now has picked a lot of interest in these processes. The other time we were talking about electric trains. Why not? We can have it. We have the vehicles now. We have the border. But what if we say all border will run on electric batteries or anything or rechargeable batteries? And why not? It's a policy. It's a matter of time. Just because politics has disrupted everything, because we don't want to annoy anyone. There is no policy that will perfectly be implemented, successfully be implemented without fearing to say, my people, my people, my people, my people. That's the only challenge. So we must continue to do the right things. Ladies and gentlemen, let me stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edwin, for those responses. I see 2 hands. I hope we can quickly get the submissions from first Geoffrey, then Alan, and then we will start the process of wrapping up the 30th session of the National Mobility Think Tank. Geoffrey and then Alan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Geoffrey Chwaneka. I do know, I've spoken to some of you in some other forums. But for me, I live here in California. I did work for Tesla for 7 years, but I'm doing something else right now. But I'm also kind of involved with some of the young entrepreneurs in Uganda in this field. So just a few comments. And also to kind of answer what the minister said about national interest. I think for me, the best national interest is really, I think the climate change and immobility, one is like a problem, the other is kind of a solution. But I think it's really economic development. And it's because that this is the time to get into another industry, in industrialization as a country. And because if you look at other countries, you know, the automotive sector started like in the beginning of this century, and this is how they industrialized. So it is an opportunity. And some specific areas, I think, where the country should concentrate are like battery development. If Uganda can get a lead in battery development, it's going to be an advantage on the continent, because I can tell you, for me, when I was at Tesla, we built a battery factory in 2014. These other companies like VW are doing it now. They're like 8 years behind. So if the country can be strategic and position itself in like getting a battery factory, it's going to be an advantage, because it is not an easy thing to do. Other countries are going to have a challenge. This is the same thing that's happened. Like at Tesla, we built a battery factory 8 years ago. These other companies are trying to do it right now, but they're having a problem. So that's one area you can be very strategic. What's going to happen is these other car manufacturers are going to look at countries in Africa which have positioned themselves. All these other companies, they're going to come to Africa. It's going to happen. It may not happen today, but they're going to look at those countries which have positioned themselves, which have invested in things like research and policy. And so I also agree with what some other people said. If government, government has to take a step about, electrifying its field. These people, these companies, they read these things. They read news, what's happening in other countries. They do. Even Tesla, even Elon, they get to read these things. The country which does that and position itself is what they're going to go. And, it's going to happen because for me, I meet people and they talk about, the next frontier is Africa, because they have to grow their businesses. They have to create, the economy, like just in the US is not enough. They have to create products for other continents. That's where, for me, I see the opportunity. And then also, there's a lot of skills that come with it. Once you learn a lot of these things, there's really nothing, I met a company which is doing like refrigeration using lithium batteries. All these are new things that can be done. So the opportunities are just so much, and the skills are interchangeable. Once you learn to do something, there's nothing which you can't do, because you get all these skills, advanced skills, and then it's really the foundation of industrialization. And that's what I said, or community development, all the other problems will be fixed. It's a really opportunity, for right now for industrial to get into this, because what's happening, even the old companies right now have to build new factories. So they are starting afresh. So for Africa, it's an opportunity to get into this. And whichever country does this first and aligns itself first, that's where investment is going to pour. And people read these things, people read what's happening, people reading. When the time when I was at Tesla, the Indian Prime Minister came and visited Tesla. But the response they took, they have so many people, but the response they gave them is that there's no policy. So policy is very important. It's a big country, big population. They said no policy, we cannot come there. So that's just what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarity. It's very, very clear. Alan?
Paul, may I interject a little bit?
Yes, Honorable Minister, please go ahead. Alan, you hold on a little. Hold your peace.
Yeah. I think these are the kind of nuggets I want us to draw from this engagement. I really appreciate this, the previous speaker's submissions. So if there are other people coming on with some such insights, that would be extremely good. Because this gives me a takeaway and it is within my hands where to push. And this is the purpose of this, this engagement. How do we draw nutrition, the nutritional elements on these three things, and we will see how we prioritize. First priority is stop our contribution to priority one, not first, but just in the order I'm giving. Stop contributing to pollution, global emissions. Mitigate, defend yourself from the effects. The third one is how do you take advantage? How do you take advantage of this to grow? Because we are not mitigating to stay the way we are, or to simply sympathetically and in a humanitarian way somehow survive. We want to catapult into growth. And so if people can identify some of such things from those documents and the opportunities, for me, the way I look at the way people stay vague, the whole document is vague. People are hiding something. The countries which are thinking, they are hiding something from making it keep you all engaged at this level while they are doing something. Thank you. Continue.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think Mr. Chivoneka has really hit the nail on the head. Do the battery, electrify mobility, and also you must have clear policy, because without policy, it is difficult for people who want to go for long haul investment to pitch in. Alan?
Thank you, Paul. I also appreciate Chiboneka's submission. Indeed, because there are problems that are local to us, and we have a bit of control on how on solutions, especially when it comes to air quality. Because there's the global climate change where the contribution is global, and if you're to address it alone, to be equivalent to trying to mow a square mile of grass with a pair of scissors. By the time you get to the middle where you started, would have already grown up. So there are local problems like air quality, because a city like Beijing, which had a very poor air quality, one of the worst in the world, and they took some measures, and e-mobility was one of them. And right now they have drastically improved their air quality within Beijing. So some of those local solutions, I think, can be prioritized because there is maximum impact with minimum investment compared to what we would require to put in place with global interventions, of which we have had so many years of conversation over the various cooperation of parties, right from the Paris Agreement, where at least there was some semblance of unity to address the issue of climate change holistically, which would have impact. So I totally agree on on mitigation. I think one thing I would add is adaptation, because it is going to take a while for us to achieve the Paris Agreement targets. And while it is happening, that's where the technology will now come in. Beyond the mitigation measures of e-mobility, I think we also need to figure out new technologies, because there is still a lot of research happening in the area of, say, carbon capture, which I think would totally change the game, even in terms of bringing back fuel, in terms of bringing back utilization of fuel, if carbon capture techniques can be truly, if carbon capture techniques can be fully developed. I think that's an area where there is a bit of, there's a lot of opportunity, especially to utilize our brain power to see how we can start thinking in that direction of some revolutionary technologies that could help us quickly expedite the issues of climate change, even at a global scale with technology. And lastly, I think it is important, because most of the times when you read some of these documents, they are a bit scanty on data. You find some of the interventions are not resulting from data analysis. I think the area of also being able to have data, and that's where the interventions like the satellite come in. What technologies we need to put in place to help us to better collect data that can then inform key interventions, and also ultimately the technologies we need to put in place, so that you're sure that indeed this technology is required, because the data says that we have maybe this number of people dying every day as a result of air quality or particulate matter. So how do we address particulate matter in the air? Because we know where it is located and where the sources and all that. I know like satellites can also see methane emissions from factories. That technology I've seen being utilized even in China and in Europe and in North America to help find people who are breaking the law in terms of emissions, because methane is even a worse emitter than carbon dioxide in terms of climate change. So those are my 2 cents on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan, for that submission. Certainly, the tank needs to reflect on some of our key problems, and I will highlight 3 very important ones which need really to drive us to think through what the minister has been talking about and some of the suggestions that have come through Mr. Chiboneka. Our highest import is on fossil fuels, 1.3 billion. So there is a number there, $1.3 billion annually is shipped out of Uganda to buy energy, and we generate. So we import all the energy that is used for mobility and so many other industrial applications. So right there you have a problem to solve. Secondly, Kampala is one of the most polluted cities in Africa and also globally. It ranks very highly on poor air quality. That's a problem. It is here. We need to solve it. And of course, ultimately, our level of industrialization, which translates into jobs, local content participation, is still dismal. And that's why we see underemployment, unemployment, and a very, very high import bill on almost all applications. So these are things that we need to think through, and we try to see how issues around, conversations around battery development here can aid in all of those areas, and also ensure that we reduce the burden. Recently, there has been that revelation of almost 30,000 deaths annually in this country due to resulting from poor air quality. And these are numbers which should really be concerning us to do something. So I think that the lighthouse initiatives that have started around energy, technology, and e-mobility should be encouraged. mainstreamed, streamlined, and supported to ensure that we see a difference in this country as we go. I wish to invite the Honorable Minister to give us the closing remarks as we round up, and I will invite thereafter, without getting back to the mic, Dr. Cosmas Mwikilize to give a round of thanks to, firstly, the presenter, Mr. Edwin Muhumuza, and then the Honorable Minister for always providing us with the strategic guidance and leadership as we conversate around transforming and translating key thoughts into actions that will aid us to get where we want to go, and of course the think tankers. Honorable Minister, the floor of yours. Address the tank.
Thank you, Paul, for steering the discussions today and the engagement. I want to thank all the members for engaging. Thank you, Edwin, for taking the time to put a lot of thought into this. I want to repeat my key statement of the year. Africa must stop delegating thinking. I see we are negotiating, but we are still negotiating from other people's think pads. We are not taking a plain sheet to ourselves and thinking so that when other things come on the way, we have a sober, neutral mind which has thought through our priorities and needs. And this is what we intend to encourage with the think tanks. Really a mind of where people take things and begin to think through them and question everything. That is one of my favorite statements. Question everything. Question everything. Question the science. Question everything, such that we have the right to think original. And I look at this energy transition for me as one of the major landmarks for the next 100 years. For the next 100 years, whether we go back to fossil fuels or whether we never successfully make it to grid, this is going to be a major landmark for technology development. From now henceforth, technology development is going to run in directions that we have not thought before. And the ones who are thinking are the ones who are going to get, because once we got fossil fuels, even people looked at those investing in solar, watt, and PVC, watt. You know, it was like, what a waste of time. It was a luxury. We remotely discussed it. I remember doing a research about it in the 90s, mid-90s personally, but it was something, a luxury. So this energy transition is the opportunity for Africa. But whether we participate in it and benefit properly is going to depend on how you and me, the people in this think tank and on the other African countries, how we take this responsibility. Members, I don't take these resolutions innocently. And I would like to commission you as spies into this document. Read and identify all the hidden things. And we bring them. What we need out of here is 3 to 4 strategies that we can implement. But we have to take everybody by surprise. If you will respond the way we have always responded, continue to COP28, go and again negotiate for the framework. COP27 has gone, so that's 1 more year gone. We are doing nothing. COP28, they will propose something. COP29, the countries which already have advanced fossil fuel technologies are still using them, while a parallel to it, they're already developing technologies which are going to command the future. And we are here waiting, and we are not developing anything. That is going to be a disaster for us, because whereas with the other technological changes, we had climate, we had soil fertility, we had water, we had things that could enable us to survive in our very rudimentary way. Those things, this technological transition is coming when we can no longer survive. We can no longer survive the way we survived on subsistence, because those things are gone. We no longer have that supporting system. So we must join the front line, not even in the middle, not even following, we must jump there. And the secret is going to be in how we commit ourselves to thinking and refining things and taking very, very accurate, quite accurate interventions on ourselves, many of them within the capacities that we will. And then when people see that you're doing something, they will come to our aid. I think that what Mr. Kaiva said, that if we can, instead of focusing just on this financing that we have to wrestle out of people's hands, if we can strategize to put the policies and the initiatives which will make people voluntarily move here, literally beg us to come here, I think that would be a good strategy. So I still expect a lot more out of these COP submissions, and we can continue the debate, but if need be, we can have another meeting and refine and share the insights again. Thank you so much. Sorry for talking so much, but thank you for everything. Thank you for the presenter. Thank you for the discussants. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. As we wrap up, Dr. Cosmas, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Join me to thank our presenter in this 30th edition of the Mobility Think Tank, Mr. Edwin Muhumuza. Edwin broke the ice on the major COP27 decisions and outcomes. He clearly pointed out how these are likely to affect us. The discussion was exciting. What is clear is that we need a clear strategy with well-defined goals and objectives without latching on to international resolutions. As the Honorable Minister has noted, should we focus on emission reduction or mitigation measures? E-mobility has featured prominently. Associated technologies such as battery manufacturing, carbon capture, but also the need for data to inform every decision that we make. Quite invigorating, I must say so, Edwin, on behalf of the entire think tank. Thank you for the illumination. Honorable Minister, thank you for being the torchbearer and encouraging us always to stop delegating thinking. And Paul, thank you for the wonderful moderation. And all think tankers, thank you for the active engagement. Thank you all once again. Till next time, have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you next
Thank you
time
so
at the
much.
31st. God bless.
All right. Thank you.